When I got back from my trip, I found my suitcases sitting out on the sidewalk with a note taped to one of the handles. It read, "If you want to stay here, the garage is available. Signed, your loving daughter-in-law." Before the cab even rolled away, I pulled out my phone and called the bank. I was the one paying the mortgage, and I needed to be sure of it. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. The sight hit me hard. 4 suitcases lined up neatly like soldiers, all of them mine. I stood there, trying to wrap my head around what I was seeing. I had just spent 10 days visiting my sister in Arizona. All I wanted now was to sink into my old chair with a hot drink and rest my legs. Instead, I was standing in the rain, locked out of my own home. I bent down, peeled the note from the suitcase handle, and read it again. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, slanted, like the pen itself was in a hurry. "If you want to stay here, the garage is available. Your loving daughter-in-law." My fingers shook as I read it twice. This wasn't just a house to me. I had lived here 40 years. My wife, Dorothy, and I built it when our son, Michael, was just a baby. We planted every tree in the yard, picked out every fixture, painted every wall together. After Dorothy passed 3 years ago, I signed the place over to Michael and his wife, Lauren. On paper, it was theirs, but I was still quietly paying the mortgage myself. I pressed the phone harder to my ear as the bank representative confirmed what I already knew. "Yes, Mr. Wilson, your automatic payment of $2,145 cleared last Friday." "Thank you," I muttered, ending the call. A fat raindrop landed on my forehead as I stood there at 62 years old, staring down at my life reduced to luggage on a wet sidewalk. The sky opened up then like it was giving me permission to finally break. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. The side-eye glances Michael and Lauren gave each other whenever I mentioned remodeling the kitchen. The little remarks about senior living communities where I wouldn't need to worry about the yard. The time they rearranged the living room last Christmas while I was away, shoving my chair, my favorite reading spot, down into the basement. Those things hadn't been small at all. The garage door was unlocked. Inside, they had set up a twin bed against the wall with a cheap nightstand and lamp. My shirts and jackets were hung on a portable rack. My photos, books, and keepsakes were stacked in cardboard boxes, each one labeled "Dad's Stuff" in Lauren's handwriting. I sat down on the thin mattress, the concrete cold under my feet, and looked through the small window at the house where I had raised my boy, buried my wife, and now apparently lost my place in the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Dad, we need the space. Lauren has been asking for a home office. The garage setup has everything you need. Please don't make this harder, like I was the one making things difficult. I had never been a man to cry easily, but that night the tears burned hot down my face. I thought of all the nights I had sat awake with Michael when his asthma kept him from sleeping. I remembered taking a second job to cover his college when times were rough. I remembered all the weekends I watched the grandkids so he and Lauren could get a break, and now I was being shoved into the garage like an old lawnmower. I didn't text him back. Instead, I called my oldest friend, Richard. "What's going on, Frank?" he asked, instantly hearing the shake in my voice. "I need a place to stay," I managed to say. "They put me in the garage." He didn't ask me to explain. "I'll be there in half an hour," he said. As I sat there on that flimsy mattress surrounded by boxes labeled "Dad's Stuff," I made up my mind. That house had been my heart for 40 years. I had poured everything into it, my sweat, my savings, my love, and they thought they could just push me out? The garage door rattled in the storm, and I stared at my shaking hands until they curled into fists. They had no clue who they were dealing with. I wasn't just Michael's father or Dorothy's widower. I was Frank Harrison. And I was done being invisible. Richard's spare bedroom wasn't much, but it had a door that locked and real windows with sunlight. After 4 nights at the Valley Inn, which felt like an insult of a name for this chapter of my life, I was grateful to be anywhere that didn't charge by the night. "You can stay as long as you need," Richard's wife said, sliding a mug of coffee toward me. "We've been rattling around this place like 2 peas in a barrel ever since the kids moved out." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "I appreciate it, but this can't be permanent. I've got to figure out what to do about the house." "You mean your house," Richard corrected firmly. "The one you're still paying for." Richard had been my friend for over 35 years. He knew Dorothy, watched Michael grow up, stood by me through the highs and lows, and unlike my own son, he still remembered who I was before I got pushed aside. I keep thinking about when things really started to shift, I admitted, staring into the black coffee. After Dorothy passed, I thought signing the house over would help Michael and Lauren. They had just had Sophie. Money was tight. And they took advantage of you, Richard said flatly, finishing the thought I hadn't wanted to admit out loud. Defend me? No. Michael said I was being difficult, that I had to adapt to the new normal. His new normal meant pretending his father never existed and treating his old man like dead weight. The shift had been so slow, I almost missed it happening. First, they pushed into the kitchen, nitpicking my cooking. Then it was complaints about my television being too loud, my friends coming by too often, my gardening taking up too much space. Every time I gave in, they took more. The truth is, I let it happen, I admitted, my voice low. I kept covering the mortgage because I didn't want them to struggle. I thought I was helping. I wanted to feel needed. You wanted to be loved, Richard said quietly. That stung because it was true. Each payment had been my way of buying a seat at my own table, paying for my place in my son's life. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Dad, when are you coming to pick up the rest of your stuff? We need to turn the garage into a playroom for Sophie. My hand shook as I showed Richard the message. His face darkened. That ungrateful little... He cut himself short, but his jaw was tight. Then he looked at me with something sharper in his eyes. Frank, there's something you need to know. I wasn't going to tell you because I knew it would cut deep, but you deserve the truth. My gut twisted. What is it? Last month at book club, Lauren was there, and she'd had a few glasses of wine and started talking. She bragged about their plans. I braced myself. What plans? They're putting the house on the market, Richard said slowly. They want to buy one of those new builds in Riverside Estates. The room spun. They're selling my house? They think it's their house, Richard replied gently. And technically, on paper it is. But morally, that's a different matter. I thought of the 4 decades etched into those walls, bringing baby Michael home from the hospital, birthday parties in the yard, Christmas mornings by the tree. The garden Dorothy and I planted for our 25th anniversary, the bedroom where she took her last breath, surrounded by the life we built together, and they wanted to trade it all away like it was just real estate. What am I supposed to do now? I whispered. Richard's eyes hardened. First, you stop paying that mortgage. Let's see how fast their big plans unravel when the bank starts calling. Second, you need to speak to my nephew David. He's a lawyer. He deals with elder rights. If anyone can help, he can. I'm not elderly, I muttered, almost defensively. Richard raised an eyebrow. You're old enough to deserve respect, and that's not what you're getting. He was right. For 3 years, I had been shrinking myself, stepping aside, staying quiet, trying not to be a burden. And what did it get me? Tossed into a garage, my life in cardboard boxes, treated like an obstacle. The hurt was still there, but under it, something else started to burn. Anger, slow, steady, and unfamiliar after all these years of giving ground. All right, I said, straightening up. Let's talk to David. Richard squeezed my hand. That's the Frank I know. And remember, you're not just Michael's father or Dorothy's widower. You're Frank Harrison. It's time they remembered that. For the first time since seeing my bags on the curb, I felt a spark. Whether it was hope or determination, I couldn't tell. But I knew one thing. I wasn't about to roll over and let them erase me. The next day I met David. He wasn't what I expected. In jeans and a Henley shirt, he looked more like a college professor than a lawyer. But when he sat down with my mortgage papers, his eyes were sharp. So you've been paying for a house that's no longer under your name? He said, his brow furrowing. Meanwhile, your son and daughter-in-law live there rent-free and are planning to sell it? Hearing it laid out that way made me wince. Yes. And they pushed you into the garage? I nodded, my face hot with shame. How had I let it get this far? You've got options, David said firmly. At the very least, you could sue for reimbursement of the mortgage payments. Those payments could qualify as a verbal contract. Richard, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. Before it goes that far, you needs to face them. Make them hear what they've done. David didn't look convinced, but deep down I knew Richard was right. Before dragging my own son into court, I had to give him one final chance to set things straight. That is how I ended up on the porch of my own house the following day, my heart pounding as I pressed the doorbell. I had lived in that house long before Michael was even a twinkle on Dorothy's ultrasound, and yet there I was, standing on my own porch like some visitor who needed an invitation. Lauren opened the door. She looked surprised for a second, then folded it into a tight, practiced smile. "Frank, we did not expect you," she said. "I need to speak with you and Michael," I said, keeping my voice steadier than I felt. She hesitated, then stepped back. "Fine. Come in." The living room felt unfamiliar the moment I walked in. My old reading lamp was gone, replaced by a slick modern floor lamp I would never have picked. The family photos on the mantel had been reshuffled, and a few of Dorothy's pictures were gone altogether. Michael came out of the kitchen wiping his hands on a towel. "Dad," he stopped when he saw it was me. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk about the house," I answered. "Barbara told me you're planning to sell." They exchanged that look again, the one that says the decision is already made. "We were going to tell you," Michael mumbled, avoiding my eyes, "once everything is finalized." "Finalized?" I repeated. "This is the place I lived for 40 years. Your mother and I built this house. We raised you here." Lauren took a slow, theatrical breath. "Frank, we understand you are attached, but we have to do what is best for our family now." "Our family," I echoed, feeling the words like a sting. "And what about me?" Silence stretched between us for a long beat. Finally, Michael's voice came out thin and patronizing. "You signed the house to us. We appreciate everything, but legally it is ours now. We decide." I swallowed hard. "I have been paying the mortgage for the last 3 years," I said. $2,145 a month, straight out of my account. I kept the payments going. They glanced at each other. "That was your choice," Lauren said coolly. "We never asked you to do that." My hands started to quake. "I did it to help, because family helps each other." "We are grateful," Michael said, but his flat tone told a different story. "That does not change the legal facts. The house belongs to us. So 40 years of my life, my money, my work, and my grief, none of that counted anymore?" Michael shrugged, uncomfortable but unmoved. "Dad, you are making this more dramatic than it needs to be. We can help you find a nice senior apartment." "I do not need a senior apartment," I snapped. "I need you to act like a decent son." Lauren stepped forward, her smile tightening into something sharp. "Frank, you are getting emotional. Maybe we should continue this later," she said. That was when I realized there was nothing left to fix. The boy I had raised and loved was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as an obligation and nothing more. I squared my shoulders and said quietly, "I stopped the automatic mortgage payments." Michael's face went white. "You what?" "If you want to sell my home, you will have to buy it yourselves," I said. Lauren's voice shot up. "You can't do that. What about our credit? We have plans." "I hear Riverside Estates is lovely this time of year," I replied calmly. Michael's jaw tightened. "You know that house was Dad's gift to me," he blurted. "It was never really yours." Those 5 words hit me like a physical blow. Never really yours. 40 years dismissed in a single sentence. I said, very softly, "I see. Then there is nothing left to discuss." My legs felt weak as I turned to go. At the door I paused and looked back at the man who no longer knew me. "Your father would be ashamed of you, Michael," I said. And for the first time, I added, "I am ashamed of you." Then I walked out and closed the door behind me. The spring air was cool against my wet face as I made my way down the driveway. Something inside me had broken that day, but something else, harder, forged by betrayal, was being born. When I told Barbara later, she froze, coffee halfway to her lips. "You did what?" she asked. "I stopped the payments," I repeated. The words still surprised me. "I told them if they want to sell, they will have to pay for it themselves." "Well," Barbara said, setting her mug down hard, "it is about time." David, who had insisted on coming along after the confrontation, was less pleased. "That is a start," he said, tapping a pen against his pad. "But we have to be careful. If your name is not on the title, you could be liable for missed payments without any claim to the property." The rush that had carried me through the meeting faded, and doubt crept in. Had I blundered? Barbara cut through it. "You finally stood up for yourself." David leaned in. "We will be strategic. I will call the bank tomorrow and explain the situation. In the meantime, gather every paper you have that proves you made those payments. I nodded. Richard had insisted on keeping neat records. At least that habit had not been useless. What about my things? I asked. Barbara squared her shoulders like she had a plan. I will go with you to collect them. If they give us trouble, I still know how to swing that old softball bat from our community league days. For all the bitterness, I found myself laughing, a small, shocked sound, but it felt good. Barbara had always been the protective type. Back in high school, she once stood toe-to-toe with the kids who mocked me for wearing hand-me-down clothes. Some things never changed. I don't know what I'd do without you two, I admitted, my throat tightening. David reached across the table and gave my hand a steady squeeze. You're not in this alone, Mr. Wilson, he said firmly. We'll make sure they stop using you. The very next morning, the phone rang. It was the bank. My gut twisted, bracing for a grilling about the missed mortgage payment. Mr. Wilson, this is Stephen Carter from the mortgage department at First National, the voice said. We've received a request to discuss the Cedar Street property. I gripped the receiver. Yes, that's correct. I understand you've been making payments on a property that is not in your name. Our records show 36 straight months of payments. That's right, I confirmed, but I've stopped making them. There was a pause. Then Stephen said, Mr. Wilson, I don't usually do this, but would you be willing to come into the branch? I think you may have options you haven't thought about. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from him. He was about Michael's age, kind eyes but sharp mind. He explained something called an equitable lien. Basically, he said, when you pay the mortgage on a property you don't own and you're not getting any benefit from it, the law can recognize that you've established an interest in it. You may be able to place a lien for the amount you've paid. If that happens, your son and his wife couldn't sell without dealing with that lien first. Hope stirred in my chest for the first time in weeks. So you're saying they can't just cash me out of my own life and walk away? That's right, Stephen nodded. Then he lowered his voice. Your son called this morning, upset about the missed payment. He didn't seem to understand how mortgages work. That didn't shock me. Michael had always leaned on others to handle the details, first Dorothy and me, now Lauren, and apparently my automatic payments. What did you tell him? I asked. I explained that missed payments hurt your credit and can lead to foreclosure. He didn't take it well, Stephen said. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Dad, we need to talk about the mortgage. ASAP. Stephen glanced at the screen. What do you want to do, Mr. Wilson? Such a simple question, but one no one had asked me in years. What did I want? Not just about the house, but about my life. I thought of Michael and Lauren dismissing my years of sacrifice, treating me like a burden while they dreamed of Riverside Estates on my dime. I want what's mine, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Stephen gave me a nod of respect. Then let's make it happen. That same afternoon, armed with Stephen's information and David's advice, I made another choice. I walked past Elena's cafe and saw the Help Wanted sign in the window. Something in me stopped. When I told Barbara later, she lifted an eyebrow. You want to wait tables? I waited tables through college, I reminded her. I need my own money, my own life. I can't just rot in your spare room. She smirked. Well, Elena's does make the best pie in town. 2 days later, I worked my first shift. By the end, my feet throbbed and my back ached, but the tips in my pocket were mine, earned honestly by my own 2 hands. I hadn't felt that kind of satisfaction in years. When I dragged myself back to Barbara's that night, tired but oddly alive, I saw 8 missed calls from Michael. I listened to the first voicemail. Dad, the bank said something about a lien. What are you doing? Call me back immediately. I deleted it without hearing the others. For once, Michael could wait on me. Barbara poured me a glass of wine and joined me on the porch swing. So how does it feel? She asked. I thought about it, watching the sun slip down and paint the sky in gold and rose. It feels like I've been asleep since Dorothy passed, and now I'm waking up. And now you're Frank Harrison again, Barbara said with a small smile. I lifted my glass in a toast to Frank Harrison. Took me long enough to find him again. After 4 weeks at Alina's, I had a rhythm. The tips were modest but steady. The work kept me busy, gave me purpose, and for the first time in a long time, I felt needed again, which is why the sight of Michael standing awkwardly at the hostess stand hit me like a jolt of electricity. "Dad," he said softly, sounding more like a boy than he had in years. "Can we talk?" Elena, the owner, looked over from behind the counter. "Take 15 if you need it, Frank," she said warmly. I nodded and led Michael to a booth in the corner, away from the regulars who had started to feel like friends. "You look different," Michael said, studying me. I smoothed my apron. "That's because I am different." He shifted, clearly uneasy. "Dad, about the house." "I'm not talking about that here." I cut him off. "If that's the reason you showed up, you're wasting both our time." "Dad, please," he said quickly, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard in years. Desperation. "Lauren and we're in trouble. The bank called about some kind of lien. Our credit score is dropping because of the missed payments." I leaned back in the booth and really looked at my son. The polished wristwatch flashing under the lights, the haircut just so, like he'd stepped out of a catalog, the faint cologne that probably cost more than I made in a full shift at Elena's cafe. For a long moment, I just studied him, this man who used to be the little boy coughing in my arms during asthma attacks. Now he sat across from me, panicked not because of what he'd done to me, but because the bank had finally told him no. Everything about him radiated ease and entitlement. The expensive watch flashing under the lights, the hair styled like he had all the time and money in the world, the faint cologne that probably cost more than I made in a day at Elena's. His life had been built on other people's sacrifices, and he didn't even see it. "What exactly do you want from me, Michael?" I asked. He leaned forward. "We need you to lift the lien and start making the payments again, just until we sell the house." The boldness of it nearly made me laugh out loud. "And what do I get in return?" "We'll make sure you're taken care of," he said, like he was offering me some incredible favor. "There's a really nice senior community in Clearview." "Stop," I said, holding up my hand. "I'm not interested in being taken care of. I've been taking care of myself and of you for years." "Dad, be reasonable. You can't keep working here." He waved at the cafe with a little flick of his hand, like it was beneath me. "You're almost 65. 62, I corrected him, "and I'm doing just fine." Michael's face hardened, the mask of contrition slipping. "Fine. What do you want? A cut of the sale?" I studied him carefully, this stranger who wore my son's face. "I want my home back." He blinked, then gave a small, nervous laugh. "That's not possible. We've already put in an offer on the house in Riverside Estates." "Not my problem," I said evenly. Michael's expression darkened. "It is your problem if you want a relationship with your granddaughter, with any of us." The threat hung there, sour and heavy. My own son was using my love for Sophie as leverage. "Are you threatening to keep Sophie from me?" He had the decency to look a little ashamed, but pressed on. "I'm just saying families are supposed to support each other. Lauren and I have a plan for our future, and you're standing in the way." "The way I stood in the way when I paid your college tuition?" I asked quietly. "When I watched Sophie every weekend so you two could have couple time? When I signed over the house and kept making the payments so you could save up for that boat last summer?" Michael flushed. "That's not fair." "No," I said, "it's not." My break was almost over. I slid out of the booth and straightened my apron. "I need to get back to work." "Dad, please." Michael's voice cracked slightly. "We need this. The house in Riverside Estates is perfect. We can't lose it." For a heartbeat, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who came running to me with scraped knees and tear-streaked cheeks. But that boy was gone. Sitting in front of me was a man who saw me as a wallet with a pulse. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I need something in writing from you and Lauren first. Meet me at David's office tomorrow at 2 p.m. Relief washed over Michael's face. "Thank you, Dad. You won't regret this." As he walked out, I wondered if I already did. The next day, I arrived at David's office early, my stomach tied in knots. I'd barely slept, replaying the decision I'd made in the dark hours of the night. Michael and Lauren arrived on the dot, dressed for a business meeting. Lauren's smile was tight but triumphant as they sat down across from David's desk. "Thank you for coming," David began formally. "Mr. Wilson has considered your request regarding the property on Cedar Street." "We appreciate that," Lauren cut in smoothly. "We're sure we can reach an agreement that benefits everyone." David slid a document across the desk. This is what Mr. Wilson proposes. Michael picked it up. As his eyes scanned the page, his expression shifted from hopeful to confused to angry. What is this? He demanded. That, I said calmly, is my condition for lifting the lien. I'll resume the mortgage payments, but the house will be sold to me, not to strangers. Lauren snatched the paper from his hands. This is ridiculous. You want us to sell you the house for the remaining mortgage balance? It's worth at least 3 times that. It's worth exactly what I've put into it, I replied. 40 years of payments, repairs, and sweat. Michael's face turned red. You can't do this. The house is legally ours. With a lien against it, David pointed out, which significantly complicates any sale. We'll fight this, Lauren said coldly. We'll get our own lawyer. I nodded. You can try, but legal proceedings take time. Months, maybe years. In the meantime, your credit scores will keep sliding, and that dream house in Riverside Estates will go to someone else. I could see the truth sink in. They had overextended themselves, counting on a quick sale of my house to finance their upgrade. You planned this all along, Michael whispered, from the moment we moved you into the garage. No, I said softly. I just finally stopped letting myself be used. Lauren stood abruptly. We need to discuss this privately. As they stepped out, David gave me an approving nod. You're doing the right thing, Mr. Wilson. I wasn't sure. The look of betrayal in Michael's eyes haunted me. Was I becoming as cold as they were? Before I could think too much, the door opened. Michael and Lauren walked back in, faces grim but resigned. We'll accept your offer, Michael said stiffly. But I hope you realize what this means for our relationship. I met his gaze steadily. I do, I told him evenly. And I hope one day you'll understand what it really meant when you put my suitcases out on the sidewalk. The first night back in my own house, I hardly slept. I drifted from room to room, running my hands along the walls, pausing at the doorway where we'd marked Michael's height year after year, standing in the kitchen where Dorothy and I had danced on our 35th anniversary. It had been 4 months since that meeting in David's office, 4 months of legal paperwork, tense handovers, and slowly reclaiming my life. The house felt both mine and not mine at the same time. Lauren had repainted most of the rooms in trendy grays and whites, wiping out the warm yellows and blues Dorothy and I had picked together. The kitchen gleamed with sleek, impersonal appliances. But under all the new paint and chrome, the bones of my home still showed. The squeaky third step on the staircase, the way sunlight spilled through the bay window in the afternoons, the slight tilt in the upstairs hallway that Dorothy always teased me about, but I never managed to fix. I stood in the master bedroom, empty now, except for the bed I'd brought from Richard and Barbara's spare room. This was the room where Dorothy and I had shared our lives, where she'd taken her last breath. It felt sacred. I'm home, I whispered, as if she might hear me. The silence that answered wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. The next morning, as I was unpacking my small set of dishes, the doorbell rang. Barbara stood there holding a pot of soup and a bottle of wine. Housewarming, she announced, striding past me into the kitchen. Though I suppose it's really a homecoming. I laughed and followed her. Feels like both, honestly. She set the soup and wine down, scanning the kitchen. Good Lord, what did that woman do to your beautiful oak cabinets? Painted them gray and swapped out the handles for something called brushed nickel, I said. Apparently oak is passé. Barbara snorted. You know what's passé? Throwing you out on the street. We both laughed, though the sting under the humor was still real. Have you heard from them? She asked, unpacking dishes with me. I shook my head. Not since the closing that Michael made it clear I'd chosen the house over them. That's not what happened, and you know it, Barbara said firmly. You chose self-respect. There's a difference. I wasn't sure Michael would ever see it that way, but I had made my peace. Letting them keep using me while treating me like an afterthought was no longer an option. Barbara popped the cork. Well, to new beginnings. We clinked glasses, and a rush of gratitude went through me for the friend who'd stood beside me when my own family hadn't. The weeks settled into a rhythm. Mornings at Elena's cafe, afternoons slowly restoring the house to something that felt like mine again. I didn't have the money to undo every one of Lauren's updates, but I could add back warmth. Colorful throw pillows, family photos on the mantel again, Dorothy's fishing gear hanging proudly in the den. One Saturday morning, I was planting tulip bulbs in the front yard when a familiar car pulled up. My heart lurched as Michael stepped out, looking unsure of himself. He hovered at the edge of the garden. "The flowers look nice," he said. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "Mom always loved tulips," he went on, glancing around. "I remember her planting them every fall." I brushed the dirt off my hands. "What brings you here, Michael?" He shifted, eyes on the ground. We, we didn't get the house in Riverside Estates." I wasn't surprised. Their credit had probably taken too many hits. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it, despite everything. Michael looked down at his expensive loafers now gathering dust. "We found an apartment instead. It's small, but it's teaching us some perspective, I guess." I waited. There was more. "Lauren's pregnant again," he said finally. "The baby's due in January." "Congratulations," I said quietly, wondering if he meant the news to hurt me, to remind me what I'd lost. Michael finally met my eyes. "Sophie asks about you. She doesn't understand why we don't visit Grandpa anymore." A sharp, sweet ache hit me. I missed my granddaughter fiercely. "She's welcome here anytime," I said. "So are you." He nodded, then hesitated. "Dad, I've been thinking about everything, about what happened." I held my breath, not daring to hope. "I'm not saying we handled things well," he continued, picking his words carefully. "But you chose a house over your family. I don't know if I can forgive that." The small hope I'd felt deflated. He still didn't get it. "I didn't choose a house, Michael," I said quietly. "I chose not to be erased. There's a difference." He frowned, clearly unconvinced. "Anyway, I thought you should know about the baby, and maybe Sophie could visit sometimes if that's okay." It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was a small opening, a crack in the wall between us. "I'd like that," I said. After Michael drove off, I sat on the porch swing, letting the whole encounter wash over me. The ache was still there, but so was something else. Strength. For the first time in decades, I wasn't living on someone else's terms. The bond with my son was fractured, maybe beyond repair. He still couldn't see the depth of the wound he had left in me, or how badly he had betrayed my trust. But he had come today. He had reached out, clumsy as it was. It wasn't an ending. Maybe it was the faintest beginning. That evening, Barbara and her husband Paul stopped by, along with Elena from the cafe and David with his wife. We gathered in my backyard, the same yard where I had once celebrated Michael's high school graduation, where Dorothy and I had marked anniversaries, where so much of life had played out in all its mess and beauty. As twilight settled, conversation flowed easily among these people who had become my chosen family. Barbara lifted her glass. "To Frank Harrison," she declared, "who reminds us all it's never too late to take your life back." Glasses clinked and faces glowed warm with something stronger than wine: acceptance, respect, even love. Later, when the stars came out over the summer sky, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the familiar creaks of the house I had fought so hard to keep. I thought of Dorothy, of the years we had built together, of the boy we had raised who had somehow lost his way. And I thought of the man I had become in these last months, stronger, steadier, unwilling to shrink for anyone's convenience. The house around me wasn't just wood and plaster. It was proof. Proof that I had survived, that I had endured, that I had finally chosen myself. I was home, not just inside these walls, but inside my own life, and for the first time in years, the road ahead was mine alone, open and waiting. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.